Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us today as we talk about food security. Food prices are continuing to surge as pandemic-battered supply chains struggle to keep up with consumer demand. Inflation is at its highest level in 40 years, and extreme weather events and labor issues are compounding this serious problem, especially for low-income families and communities of color. As we enter the third year of COVID, how can issues surrounding access and affordability, food insecurity, nutrition, and sustainability be addressed? We have a strong lineup of speakers, and we're going to be hearing from them this afternoon. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events. Use the hashtag, that's what matters most, hashtag The Hill Food. I think that's the first time for us, The Hill Food. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. And as with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Don't throw your computer out the window. Just refresh the page and that should fix the problem. The pandemic catapulted issues of inequality in the food system to the top of the agenda for some lawmakers. For Congressman Jim McGovern, co-chair of the House Hunger Caucus, food security has been a top priority for decades. These days, he's wearing his message on his mask. If you walk the halls of Capitol Hill, you will recognize Congressman McGovern easily because his mask is emblazoned with the words, "End Hunger Now." Thank you for joining me, Congressman Jim McGovern. Great to be with you, Jim. Good to see you again, sir.
Yeah, it's good to be with you.
You know, look, I mean, I want to just go to something because I don't often think that White House summits fix everything, but they certainly create a punctuation point around the seriousness, and there's a kind of power in convening. And I know, and I just want to put this on the table because I found it very interesting, that, you know, our last big White House summit on hunger and food was in 1969. And I know you're advocating for another one. Are you being heard? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you're right. It's been a long time since we last had a White House conference on the topic. But that conference actually produced some results 53 years ago. I mean, it produced a stronger food stamp program. It produced WIC. It raised awareness about the importance of nutrition in combating hunger. So a lot of good things came out of that. And I want another one because I think it's time to convene, everybody who has a role to play in combating hunger and nutrition insecurity as well. And let's come up with a comprehensive plan. We do not have a plan to end hunger in this country. And I tried under the Obama administration to move it, and we weren't able to get it off the ground. We're now trying again with President Biden, and we're having some very constructive conversations with the White House. And I'm hoping, and I'm very optimistic that they will get to yes, and we will have this conference.
Congressman, I interviewed Rashad Robinson yesterday of Color of Change, and he had this great comment. It made me think all night about it. He said, we can't depend on philanthropy to solve big structural problems. And I know there's a lot of philanthropy. In fact, later I'll tell the folks, I interviewed Jackie Walorski, Congresswoman Walorski, who worked with you a lot on hunger, and a lot of the approach is philanthropy. But I'll ask you the same thing, go to Rashad's comment for a minute. Do we need something bigger than philanthropy to address food insecurity in this country?
We do. Philanthropy is important, and we applaud all those who are, donating and on the front lines and trying to help alleviate this problem. But, charities will be the first ones to tell you that they're not the solution here. We need structural change. We need a safety net that doesn't have so many holes in it. Up until recently, the average SNAP benefit was about $1.40 per person per meal. The Biden administration has increased that slightly, but it is still, wholly inadequate for a family to be able to put nutritious food on the table. And especially with inflation, food prices have gone up. It's even more difficult. We need to understand the relationship between our school systems and making sure that our kids have access to nutritious food. My two sisters are school teachers in the Worcester Public School System. They remind me all the time that meal that a child gets in school is every bit as important to that child's ability to learn as a textbook or a laptop. Our healthcare systems are disconnected from food and nutrition. Why should a doctor be able to write you out a prescription for a high-priced, pharmaceutical, but he or she can't write out a prescription, for fresh produce, if that is what will help you get better? So we need some structural changes. We need to look at this from a different lens than we did 53 years ago. And we have to also put behind us some of these some of these notions that are incorrect. I mean, you listen to Congress debate on some of our food safety and our food security programs, you would get the impression that this is all this is about is somebody getting a job. Well, getting a job is important to solving food insecurity, but the majority of people on SNAP right now who can work actually do work. So oftentimes the narrative you hear in Congress does not reflect the reality that exists out throughout the country. And that's why we want this conference, and we want to have people with lived experiences be at the forefront, because, it's not enough for politicians to talk about hunger. We need to listen to people who actually are hungry and give us some advice on how best to solve this problem from their perspective.
Jim, it seemed like a year ago, I used to discuss food insecurity, what was going on during COVID, the breakdown of the supply chain in food inside America. Jose Andres was coming in and sharing with us what was going on in some of the private sector, responses to the collapse, dealing with, kids that were now at home and not in schools, and, how do you get SNAP credits out to folks more efficiently. I was talking to Jackie Walorski about the pork issues of, millions and millions and millions of pigs being slaughtered and not going to potential food need. I guess, with the exception of today and today's forum, I haven't heard that kind of conversation very much lately. As the pressure seems to be coming off from COVID, as we've got other things on the agenda, are we losing the moment because of the pressure created by that?
Well, I hope not, because quite frankly, this issue that we're talking about was a problem before COVID.
Right.
It just got exacerbated during the COVID crisis. I mean, before COVID, there was close to 40 million Americans who didn't know where the next meal was going to come from. That's a big problem, and it wasn't being addressed holistically. And one of the challenges to addressing it is the fact that the way Congress is set up, the way our executive branch is set up, there are bits and pieces of this issue that fall under the jurisdiction of various committees and agencies. So if you want to talk about SNAP, we can talk about the Agriculture Committee. But if you want to talk about school meals, that's the Education and Labor Committee. We have a lot of active duty servicemen and women who quite frankly are dealing with issues of hunger and nutrition and security. Well, that's an Armed Services Committee. That's a Pentagon issue. We have veterans who are hungry. Well, that's a VA and a Veterans Committee issue. So again, the reason why we want this conference is to pull everybody together, all hands on deck. Everybody has a role to play in this. By the way, not just USDA, not just HHS, not just the committees I mentioned, but transportation has a role. Getting food to people who live in rural areas, not near supermarkets. Our energy department has a role to play. The high cost of energy cuts into people's food budgets. So we need a more holistic approach, and we have to be focused on how do you end this problem, not how do you manage this problem. And so I think this is a moment where if we can get the White House to say yes, which I hope they will, we can bring everybody together. All of government, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, faith-based sector, our schools, our hospitals, you name it, get everybody together and let us come up with a holistic plan, a roadmap that we can actually, with benchmarks that we can actually follow and measure whether we're making success.
Now, I know you've got your hand in a lot of legislative initiatives, but with regard to the Hunger Caucus, are there any specific legislative drivers of this that you'd like to share with us?
Well, let me just say this. I chair the Rules Committee.
Right.
I'm also on the Agriculture Committee. One of the things the Rules Committee has been doing, by the way, because we have no jurisdictional constraints like other committees, so we can do whatever the hell we want to do. So we have been actually doing
no
hearings
rules on us.
Yeah, right. We've been doing a series of hearings on a whole range of issues, looking at this more holistically. Now, I mentioned the issue of a lot of active duty servicemen and women who are experiencing hunger. What we found out is that people's housing allowance gets counted against their overall income when you're in the military, and oftentimes spouses can't find a job because they're only deployed in a particular area for a short period of time. So these people are ineligible for SNAP or other government benefits. So, one of the things we're trying to do is get that fixed. to not have the housing allowance count against what veterans, what a service member's overall income is. We're trying to increase the reimbursement for school meals so that our kids have more nutritious food, but also so that schools can be innovative and provide additional meals and even meals for children to bring home on weekends. As I said, my two sisters are school teachers. They tell me that Mondays are the worst day of the week because kids often show up at school not having eaten over the weekend. So we need to make sure they have their nutrition over the weekend. We need to figure out better ways to get people who live in areas, again, outside of major cities or outside of out of range from supermarkets. How do we get food out to those people? We're working with companies like DoorDash and others trying to figure out innovative ways to make it easier to deliver food to people who are outside access to a supermarket. Medically tailored meals is the other thing. We all talk about the rising cost of healthcare. How do we get our medical systems, our hospitals, to be more attentive to nutrition? In medically tailored meals is one of the ways to help people get better once they get out of hospitals and to help reduce readmittance levels. So we have an endless list of things that we are working on, but we all want it to make sense. We want it to be part of one big package, and I think that's where this White House conference comes in. We need to look at this, not just this is the farm bill, so let's talk about SNAP, or it's the child nutrition reauthorization bill, so let's only talk about school meals. We need to talk about this more holistically because and everybody has a role to play.
I'd love to cover that White House conference. Jim, there's another issue, you'll kind of look at Build Back Better. And these are my views, these are my editorial views, and they don't need to be anybody else's. But I sort of look at it as like a big conglomerate that's most likely going to have to go through some disaggregation and Senator Joe Manchin has said that the pieces that are most important are going to have to go through regular order. You're in these committees. Is there any movement yet to take the pieces that relate to food security, hunger, whatnot, that were part of Build Back Better and begin moving them now by regular order? Is that a silly question?
Yeah, well, the problem we have is the filibuster in the Senate.
Right.
And again, as I said, some of the challenges we have are the perceptions that some of my colleagues have about people who are struggling with hunger. Oftentimes we hear politicians blame those people who are hungry, saying that it's your own fault. And some of the solutions here are going to be to expand some programs. But look, here's the deal. When we passed the Rescue Act, we had the child tax credit was part of it. That reduced poverty amongst children by, I think, 24%, if I'm not mistaken. And yet that has stopped. And we're still trying to work out what we can get done with Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema on Build Back Better. But again, reducing poverty by 24% amongst children is a good thing. We should all want that because, with poverty comes other challenges that these kids have to face, including hunger and nutrition insecurity. So we need to, again, figure out what, in fact, we can get through the Senate through a reconciliation process, and that requires Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema cooperating. I'm all open to passing whatever we can, so long as we can get it through the Senate. I'm not interested in exercises of moving legislation through the House that only to die in the Senate. I want to get some stuff done. I want to help people, and that's what we're focused on.
Congressman, we're taking some questions from the audience, and we have one here for you from Craig Smith. Craig?
Hello. Craig Smith, USDA NRCS agronomist. Question: what is the anticipated role of urban agriculture in food security?
Thank you.
I think I envision a major role for urban agriculture. I'm talking to you from my home city of Worcester, Massachusetts right now. And we're trying to take some of the rescue money that we received, and actually putting it into efforts to help promote urban agriculture in the city. We have a very diverse immigrant population, and urban agriculture has been a way for them to be able to produce, the kinds of produce that, quite frankly, that is culturally appropriate for many of these different immigrant groups. We're also trying to figure out ways to help our schools get more involved in, agriculture, on their grounds. And, Massachusetts, unfortunately, we have harsh winters. So, we're now also trying to figure out how we can do greenhouses. And we're talking about freight farms as well in our urban areas to provide food for our schools and for, people who live in economically challenged neighborhoods. So I think urban agriculture has a great future, and we need to be very aggressive about it. So again, if we get this White House conference, I'm hoping that a big piece of this will be on urban agriculture.
Just finally, as I mentioned, I talked to Representative Walorski, who does not pull her punches when it comes to being a conservative, but she really respects and admires you, and you're, I'll admit on a little bit more on the liberal side of the equation, and I don't know if the two of you are like your old boss, Senator McGovern and Bob Dole, who also were very committed to addressing the hunger crisis in America. But it raises this interesting question about opportunities to genuinely work across the aisle in ways that get traction, that aren't silly and puffery, and whether or not what you and Jackie Walorski are doing is something that could go viral among some of your other colleagues.
I hope so. Look, I have a great deal of respect for Jackie Walorski. I've also been working with my fellow Rules Committee colleague, Tom Cole, a Republican from Oklahoma, who has been very supportive of this initiative. Others on the Rules Committee, Guy Rushenthaler, has been working with me on helping deal with the issue of hunger amongst our active duty service members. So, look, again, I think what is important here is for us to be able to strip away all the politics and actually listen to people with lived experiences, and figure out ways that we can come together, to help alleviate some of the challenges that they face. Look, we live in the richest country in the history of the world. As we speak, we got about 40 million Americans who don't know where the next meal is going to come from. I mean, I've seen hungry children in the United States, in schools, in my district. It breaks your heart. It doesn't have to be. Jackie has seen the same thing. Tom has seen the same thing. And, you mentioned George McGovern and Bob Dole. McGovern was a liberal, and Dole was a conservative. And they came together on this because they thought it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do morally. And they also thought that it was a good investment in our country. As I said, hungry children don't learn. People who go to work who are food insecure are less productive. Our healthcare system gets saddled with all kinds of additional healthcare challenges when people do not have access to good nutrition. And so, we've learned a lot since the last conference, and there are lots of good ideas out there. I've been doing field hearings all around the country. I've seen incredible models that can be replicated all across this country. Let's get this conference together. Let's do something meaningful. Let's go as big and bold as we can, and let's end hunger once and for all in this country.
I hope you succeed with that. I really would like to cover that and see that happen. Well, Congressman Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, Worcester, Massachusetts, Chair of the House Rules Committee, Co-Chair of the House Hunger Caucus. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much. I always learn from you, and thank you so much for your friendship. Take care, Jim. Thank you.